and pardon my ignorance on this subject, because believe it or not, I started playing in Mists of Pandaria, a little mop baby. But has the community always been so like metrically oriented in that like fashion? Like, because it would seem to me like, especially in Legion and then BFA, that like people started to focus a fucking shitload like on numbers and efficiency, and like I don't know if maybe that's just my perception. Has it always been that way?
Yes, always. I mean, like, people have always cared a lot about it, but I think that it really started happening whenever we got Group Finder. I mean, it's like Group Finder, you know, because it made a lot of the interactions that you had kind of these throwaway interactions that you didn't really need to like stay with or do anything with. That's whenever I think that things really just became so much like, okay, just do this as fast as you can. That's the only thing that matters, and who cares about the rest of it? I think that's what happened.
If you could get rid of LFR, would you do it?
I'd delete it today.
Yeah, same.
The issue isn't even really like, I would be,
fucking stupid.
Yeah. I would remove LFR. I would remove a lot of the different features like that I feel like are bad for the game. Like, I don't like LFR. I don't like LFD. I don't like any sort of like automated group finding. I think that it's basically killed the game, and it's made social interactions meaningless. And it's been an overall just like a terrible thing for the game. And I don't know why. I'm genuinely surprised that Blizzard hasn't realized that.
Part of me has to wonder, like, part of me has to think, because I look at the corporate side of it, and I'm like, obviously there's going to be influence from your investors and all that kind of stuff. Part of me has to wonder, I feel like they must realize that they have to know. There's got to be some kind of reason why they can't act upon that, because it's obviously something the player base does not fucking like. The majority of the player base, I would say.
Here's what I think that it is.
I don't understand
It's the whole mentality of you think you do, but you don't. And the player base, it's like the people that are participating in things, it's kind of like them. If you looked at metrics, you'd say that garrison missions and mission tables in general were successful, right? Because
people
like
had to fucking do them.
Well, yeah, but like they're successful because a lot of people were doing them. So if you look at it and you say, okay, well, if success is participation, then a lot of people are participating. Wow, this is very successful. I think that's kind of what happened.
Poor way to.
I think that's a poor way of doing it, but I think that's how they do it. And I think that's the main issue, is that the way that their tools for evaluating player enjoyment, they can't evaluate player enjoyment, right? Because, I mean, for obvious reasons, you know, it's what do you call it? It's subjective. Like, how do you define enjoyment? But at the same time, like, I do think that's kind of what's happened. They're catering to imaginary players. Well, that's the thing also, is I think that they're catering to players that don't exist. You know, like these people that just like play the game super casually, and, you know, they think that, oh my God, if I don't give Dave, the casual player who only plays 2 hours a week, you know, access to killing the last raid boss, he'll never pay for the game again. But the truth is, Dave has probably been playing the game for 10 years, and he has had no problem with it before. And I think that's really the main issue that they have, is that, you know, they underestimate their players. I think that's basically what it is. They're underestimating their player base, and they just assume that their player base is fucking stupid, I guess.
Do you think that ease of access takes away from the kind of motivation for investment, because they know that if they want to see the raid, they can just queue for LFR rather than having to actually put work into it? Do you think that having that accessibility available to them actually kind of demotivates the player from playing the game in general?
Absolutely. Because like part of being able to see a raid, part of being able to do this was like being able to see the raid yourself and actually do it. And now that you can just do that super easily, like I'm sorry, but I don't think that's good for the game. And I never have thought it was good for the game. And I think that the investment and everything that people have, it's like there's also like all these like secondary things, right? So you have like people being super kick happy, etc. You couldn't afford to be kick happy in classic WoW, right? Let's say you're Alliance, let's say you're doing Scar and Monastery. You get a tank in there that doesn't know what threat is. It is actually faster for you to teach him what threat is than for you to try to find somebody else.
Damn.
Think about that.
That's pretty intense.
Yeah, and that's the way that it used to be. And nowadays, obviously, that's not the case at all. And it's a huge disappointment. And I would like to see Blizzard realize that and just start doing things in the opposite direction. I hope that, like, Classic's going to be great, but the truth is that Classic is not going to be this infinite content thing that everybody is going to just play forever. And I hope that Blizzard doesn't use that as a rationalization for saying that the way that they created and crafted Classic was a bad idea. I think that to some degree it should be important that people get a chance to experience content, but I also don't think that making content as accessible as possible with no barrier to entry and no challenge at all is actually a good game. And that's ultimately what it comes down to. Is this even a good game? I would say no. In a lot of cases.
No way.
No.
This game sucks dick. Just say it. It sucks dick.
There is a little bit of a barrier to entry, but I think that it's the wrong kind of barrier to entry, as well as, like, the only barrier to entry to LFR, for instance, which I would get rid of as well, is your item level. Whereas, like, there's no actual interactivity in regards to unlocking the raid. There's, like, no attunement process for most of this stuff. Like, there's nothing that really, like, I don't know. There's nothing that really engages you in that same manner. And additionally, like, with LFR, this is kind of a side point. Most people probably won't care, but to speak on, like, getting players more involved in the lore, in Antor's The Burning Throne, for instance, there were entire portions of dialogue that were completely absent from the LFR version of the raid because you skipped through the like RP between certain fights, and so, like, a lot of what's there as substance for storytelling within the raid is actually gone because it's actually stripped from the LFR version. Like, people that go in and do only LFR didn't see half what the fuck was even in that raid. So
that's a really good point. I never even thought about that before, but you're completely right. I mean, there's a lot of lore and everything. I don't buy this whole idea that it's all about making sure that players get a chance to experience the content. What a bunch of fucking bullshit. It's for lazy players that
spend
are
the fucking
antisocial.
time then. Like,
well, it's not even about that. It's for lazy antisocial players, because everybody knows that, like, if I wanted to go and do whatever the raid is, I could go and queue up and do the raid right now, with, like, some different normal mode group. And normal mode is not that hard. I think that they should make it to where, remember back in Wrath? Did you play in Wrath?
I did not.
Well, Nax 10 and Nax 25 were a joke, right? And I think that Blizzard has used, like, the fact that these raids and everything are, like, kind of easy now as, like, a rationalization to basically, like, increase the discrepancy between, like, let's say high-end and really low-end players, because right now the easiest content is easier than it's ever been in the game, and the hardest content is harder than it's ever been in the game. And I think that it creates this huge disconnect between the player base, and because they're also effectively doing the same thing. You're killing the same bosses, you're fighting the same mobs, but one person's just fighting them and they're just infinitely more powerful than the first person or second person or whatever you want to say. So I really don't like the way they've been trying to handle that in, like, the past. It sounds ridiculous. Past, like, 10 years. I think that they're just really they're misguided.
I think one of the biggest faults on Blizzard's behalf when it comes to difficulty is, one, I think there's too many levels of difficulty. You don't need an LFR, a normal, a heroic, and a fucking mythic. That's the most retarded shit I've ever fucking seen. First of all, LFR, like, has basically no mechanics. Normal is not much better. I think basically, personally, how I think it should be is that they should introduce pretty much all the mechanics. There should basically, in my opinion, there should be two difficulties. One in which they introduce all of the base mechanics and you have to learn how to do the mechanics, and then in one where they introduce maybe one or two mythic mechanics and it is scaled up so that it's more difficult. I don't think, because what they've done is they introduce difficulty as complexity, and that's when you, like, try to look at normal versus mythic. Obviously there's going to be a gear scaling factor there. There always has been. But when you're looking at normal and there's fucking 3 mechanics, and then you look at mythic and there's, like, 9-10 mechanics, I don't understand, like, the difficulty scaling there. One, for the average player is so absurd that normal person's not going to go into mythic ever.
I think that, well, that's the problem, is that, like, they're designing mythic for an increasingly shrinking player base. It's like, you look at how many different alliance guilds were able to clear mythic Unat. I mean, come on, that's ridiculous that it's that low. I mean, come on. I think that Blizzard needs to do a much better job with trying to, create content that's actually accessible for its player base. And it doesn't mean making something that's super easy. It makes making something that's super good.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it has to be super accessible, and I don't think it has to be the most insane grind to get into it. I just think it's got to be engaging in a manner that feels rewarding and makes you actually want to do it, because at the end of the day, a lot of people aren't doing raiding because they think it's too hard. A lot of people don't do it because they don't fucking think it's worth their time. And I don't know. I think Blizzard's got to do something to get people to change their outlook on that.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, think about how terrible of a system that is. People literally don't even want to do the content because they think it's a waste of time. I mean, that's like, what a terrible place for a game to be in. And I don't know. I think that just like mythic raiding and everything, the value of that has really kind of gone down. As you get older, I think that Ulduar is probably the best way that it could be in my mind. I liked Ulduar a lot, and its difficulty model of having one difficulty and then optional hard modes. I think
that was a great system.
Yeah, that was amazing. And I
didn't get to play it, but conceptually it seems superior to what we have now.
Well, the thing is that there's a certain amount of finality whenever you, let's say you kill Illidan. You kill Illidan. Like in Burning Crusade, you killed Illidan. It wasn't like, oh, well, now I need to do it on Mythic, and on the Mythic fight, this is whenever, Sargeras comes in and Lady Vosh gets resurrected and they have to fight Illidan too. No, you literally just kill Illidan. And like being able to just complete it and beat the game in that way, it's simple. It's like Classic WoW is simple but complex. And I think that like it's much easier
for different reasons, different aspects.
For a new player, if I were to say, some new player comes in and they ask me, where should I start? I want to start playing WoW. What should I do first, right? And I would say play Classic. I think Classic is absolutely a better new player experience. Abso-fucking-lutely.
Do you think a lot of that comes from the sheer... well, I know Classic, fundamentally is just so different from current WoW, but it would seem to me, at least as far as my perception goes, that a lot of that comes from the feeling of just vastness of Classic, of like, I'm going to be honest, I probably won't play Classic because I just don't know that I have the time. I work a full-time job.
What's wrong with you, man?
I work McConnell. I just don't think W Omega Lol RK. I just don't think I have the time. I might do it like with my friends, like casually, but I'm afraid that I'm gonna fall behind because they can play. Their schedules align more than mine does, and I'm worried that like I'm gonna really fall behind.
Quit your job. Whatever your job is, it's not as cool as playing Classic WoW, dude.
You're not. Hey, dude, you're probably not wrong. But I just, as an example, like I did try out the beta for a little bit. I was in a Barons, and just the sheer amount of time and like how big the zone felt because of how small your little character feels. You don't have a mount, you don't have your little chauffeured fucking chopper to take you around at level 1. Like I think that was kind of a almost bewildering feeling that current WoW doesn't have at all. Like, well,
yeah, I mean, you have some like the travel time is like kind of just a secondary thing. I actually think that Classic WoW is much more casual friendly than current WoW is by a mile. So even if you're not playing, like you're concerned with like getting behind of your friends. I mean, that's just that's true. I mean, that could absolutely happen. That's not really by the nature of the game per se. I mean, your friends could get ahead of you in BFA too in a lot of ways. They could just have much better gear, and there's not a lot of content you can run together that would be mutually beneficial outside of like Titan Forges and maybe some Azerite gear. But overall, I would say that Classic WoW, one of the things that it does really well is it allows players to set their own goals and work towards something over time. I think also one of the reasons why Classic WoW is a better new player game is that there's simply less things to think about. Like there's less mechanics, there's less buttons to press. It's simple. And
you think that allows you to be more engaged with the world around you because of it?
I mean, I think that could be like a secondary reason. Yeah, sure. But I think the main reason, honestly, is just the fact that you're able to just sit there and just play the game, and you don't have to worry about 13 years of nuance with different mechanics. You just get to play the game. And I think that's really the thing that WoW is like kind of missing now, is that the more ways that they've tried to make it new player friendly, I think that a lot of them have kind of almost backfired. And like try to include everyone. I think that
fucking Titan forging and all that dumb shit.
Here's a really good example. And that's bad. But like, here's one that's even worse than that. Is you think about the way that the legendary ring and WoD worked. If you didn't have the legendary ring, you weren't getting into a group. You couldn't play the game. And you were just so vastly
too weak.
Yeah, you were just too weak. And so instead of it being a reward from raiding that they wanted to give everyone, it turned into being this requirement that forced players into doing something. And if they didn't have that thing accomplished yet, they wouldn't even be able to do anything. And it's really disappointing.
On kind of going back a second, I wanted to ask you, I know that your chat has tried to get you to play this several times. I assume you've never played old school RuneScape, right?
No.
So I'm not gonna like talk a bunch about RuneScape or like draw comparisons, but just one thing that they do on OSRS is that when you log out, it actually asks you if you enjoyed playing today. It asks you that every single time when you log out for the first time that day. It'll ask you, and I think it's I think that's an interesting way to just get feedback from your play. And it's not like super in depth. It's just like, did you actually enjoy what you were doing today? I know what you were saying earlier. Enjoyment is so subjective depending on the individual.
Yeah.
That's why I would never push to have something like pet battles removed, because quite frankly, I don't give a fuck about pet battles. They're extraneous and they're pretty low effort, all things considered. But I just wonder, like, they're for what?
Nothing. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, maybe I don't know. I'm not sure why WoW doesn't have something like that incorporated in their game, just to get a kind of a daily feedback from the player on, like, are you actually having fun when you're playing this game?
Yeah.
And they pull like everything that they put in OSRS is pulled into the game. Do I think that's reasonable with WoW? No. But do I think that if there's a majority vote that's taking place with poll booths actually in the fucking game, do I think that that's valuable feedback, that something like WoW could really benefit from?
If they had the poll booths at the end of Mythic Raids.
At the end of Mythic Raids.
You finally complete the raid. It's like, okay, how do you want to see the game change? That'd be it.
Do you think? Yeah.
Well, the ironic thing about that is actually I don't even believe that. It's a joke, and like the idea is that people that are stupid, I don't want stupid people to have like their own input. But the problem, I mean, like, look at Legion, the Legion stat templates, for example. Like, those were, like, all the high-end players wanted that, but they were terrible for the game. There are a lot of examples of Blizzard catering to a minority of players, and sometimes that's a high-end minority, with, like, creating these super difficult mythic raids, or, you know, creating the stat templates that remove the progression out of PvP. Both of these things are done out of the advice of these high-end players. So I don't think that high-end players fundamentally should be the ones that decide the way the game should go. But I think Blizzard should look at the most invested and most engaged players and the ones that really love the game and see, how can we emulate the experience that you had that made you love the game? How can we emulate that for everyone else that's going to be coming into it?